Welcome to your dose of Wowness. Congress held hearings, officers testified under oath, the Pentagon acknowledged programs it had denied for 50 years. This is not a conspiracy theory anymore. In 2023, a former United States intelligence officer stood in front of a congressional committee, raised his right hand, and stated that the U.S. government has been secretly retrieving and reverse engineering non-human craft for decades, and that people have been killed to keep it quiet. He said this under oath, with legal whistleblower protection, after being formally assessed as credible by the Intelligence Community Inspector General. The news cycle moved on, but the testimony remains on the congressional record. What happened next is even more important. Okay, let's dive into the documented record. Today we're covering the institutional timeline, the physics problem, 5 key documented cases, the sworn congressional testimony, the stigma system, and finally, the disclosure battle. Section 1. The institutional timeline, from Project Blue Book to modern disclosure. You know, for most of the 20th century, the government's official public stance was just that unidentified flying objects were natural phenomena, or, simply misidentified aircraft. In fact, the Air Force very publicly closed Project Blue Book back in 1969. Case closed, right? Well, not exactly. Behind closed doors, a parallel, highly classified investigation track was still running, entirely out of public view. Let's fast forward to 2007. A program called AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, was quietly formed, and the public knew absolutely nothing about this, literally nothing, until a massive 2017 New York Times article broke the story. That one singular disclosure, it was a real game changer. It forced a total cascade of official actions. By 2021, the Director of National Intelligence had to release a preliminary assessment. Then in 2022, the Pentagon established a permanent office called AARO to investigate these anomalies. And all of that paved the way for the historic 2023 congressional hearings. And I want you to look closely at this number. $22 million. That was the exact hard budget allocated to the classified AATIP program, managed right under the Defense Intelligence Agency. We're not talking about some fringe side project here. This was heavily funded, highly classified institutional tracking of anomalies that the government was publicly claiming didn't even exist. Section 2, the physics problem, sensor data versus known aerodynamics. Okay, so now we're moving entirely away from theories and directly into hard sensor data. The core problem we're facing here is a sheer, absolute contradiction of known aerodynamics. Let's think about normal atmospheric physics for a second. If you fly at supersonic speeds, you generate a massive acoustic shockwave, a sonic boom, right? And if you hit hypersonic speeds, you superheat the air around you, creating a highly visible plasma sheath and an intense infrared heat signature. Plus, sudden extreme acceleration subjects any physical mass to thousands of g-forces, which would completely destroy it, literally tear it apart. Yet, the recorded capabilities of these unidentified aerial phenomena violate all of these laws. Military sensors are actively tracking them executing silent hypersonic flight, showing absolutely zero detectable heat or plasma signature, and accelerating instantly from a complete dead stop. This leaves our top military analysts grappling with what is basically an impossible data set. Let me emphasize this. We are talking about instant acceleration to hypersonic speed, completely silent flight, sustained hovering in Category 4 hurricane winds, where any known human aircraft would be grounded immediately, and trans-medium travel, meaning these objects are moving from the air, plunging directly into the ocean without any structural deformation or splash, and just keeping going. Oh, and they move in coordinated swarms without emitting any detectable radio or communication signals. So look, these characteristics leave us with exactly 3 terrifying options. Option 1, the most advanced military radar and optical sensors in the entire world are simultaneously hallucinating the exact same errors. Option 2, this is a completely unacknowledged, deep black human technology that is decades ahead of known science. Or Option 3, the technology is simply not human. Section 3, 5 key documented cases, cross-corroborated military encounters. Let's dive into the specific cross-corroborated military encounters where this exact physics problem was caught on tape and tracked on radar. First up, November 2004. The USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group tracked a white 40-foot oblong object shaped exactly like a tic-tac. No wings, no rotors, no exhaust, nothing. It dropped from 80,000 feet, perfectly mirrored a Navy pilot's movements, and then instantly accelerated to a point 60 miles away in just seconds. And this was fully corroborated by radar, infrared, and visual contact. Then, between 2014 and 2015, the USS Roosevelt recorded daily incursions of objects, often described as cubes inside translucent spheres, tracked right on their Aegis radar. In 2019, the USS Omaha captured video of a spherical object flying alongside the ship before smoothly transitioning into the ocean without a single splash. Fast forward to 2022 and 2023, highly advanced radar systems at Eglin Air Force Base tracked anomalies just brazenly breaching heavily restricted airspace. And finally, perhaps the most alarming part, there is a documented historical pattern of UAPs hovering over U.S. nuclear facilities and actively disrupting intercontinental ballistic missile launch systems. Guys, this isn't an equipment error, this is a cross-corroborated reality. Which brings us to a highly specific, very important number, 144. Back in 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a report formally acknowledging 144 UAP incidents involving U.S. military personnel between 2004 and 2021. And out of those 144 documented multi-sensor events, they could confidently explain exactly one. Just one.
Now, I want to be absolutely clear about something before we go any further. Everything presented in this explainer so far is on the official record. Official documents, sworn witnesses, declassified footage. I'm not asking you to blindly believe anything. I'm simply showing you what the government's own documents and sworn personnel are saying. If you want to keep following the actual data as this rapidly unfolds, make sure to hit subscribe, because the story only gets deeper from here.
Section 4. Sworn Congressional Testimony. The July 2023 House Oversight Hearings. What truly changes this from a wild story into a matter of official record is the impeccable caliber of the witnesses involved. We're talking about Commander David Fravor, a highly decorated naval aviator. He detailed that 2004 USS Nimitz encounter under oath, noting that unknown personnel actually arrived on the ship shortly after and confiscated the original radar data. Then you have Lieutenant Ryan Graves, who testified that Navy pilots experienced a daily, routine UAP presence in training airspace. He warned Congress that unexplained objects flying right alongside supersonic fighter jets is a severe active flight safety risk. And then there's David Grusch. He served as the representative to the UAP task force for both the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office. Grusch testified that he uncovered a multi-decade covert program focused on retrieving and reverse engineering non-human craft and biological material. And he stated this was completely hidden from congressional oversight. To really understand the immense gravity of Grusch's claims, you have to understand whistleblower protection. Grusch didn't just go out and give a random media interview. He utilized a formal legal safeguard. This law allows intelligence officials to report classified information to Congress or the Inspector General without facing retaliation. But there's a catch. The claims must be deemed credible and urgent. He reported his findings to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, who formally assessed Grusch's claims as both credible and urgent. This specific legal framework is exactly what allowed him to speak to Congress under oath without going straight to prison for violating his security clearance. That carries immense legal weight. Section 5. The Stigma System. The Mechanics of Suppressing Data. So, for decades, the public heard absolutely nothing. And during his testimony, Ryan Graves broke down exactly how that silence was manufactured. It's essentially a bureaucratic machine. Here's how it works. First, a pilot encounters a UAP in restricted airspace. Second, filing an official report immediately triggers a mandatory psychological evaluation. Third, because of that evaluation, the pilot's active flight status and future career progression are instantly threatened. So fourth, the pilot just does the math, protects their hard-earned career, and the incident goes entirely unreported. This system was originally designed back during the Cold War to hide U.S. tracking capabilities from the Soviets, but it mutated. It became a permanent, systemic barrier against reporting any anomalies. And the truly terrifying result of this system? The existing data we have is only the residue that somehow survived that massive disincentive structure. Those 144 cases acknowledged by the ODNI, the daily incursions off the East Coast, that is just the tiny fraction of encounters where the evidence was simply too overwhelming to hide, or the personnel were just brave enough to risk their entire careers. The true number of military UAP encounters is likely orders of magnitude higher than we know. Section 6. The Disclosure Battle. Constitutional Friction in 2024 through 2026. This perfectly leads us to the core constitutional crisis at the very heart of this entire topic. The big question: can the executive branch legally hide special access programs from congressional oversight? See, the executive branch uses a tiered classification system. The absolute most sensitive operations are placed in what's called special access programs, or SAPs. Whistleblowers are currently alleging that UAP retrieval programs have been buried so deep inside these SAPs that even the Congressional Intelligence Committees, the exact people constitutionally mandated to fund and oversee these operations, are legally blocked from seeing them. It's a huge blind spot. And this friction, it has resulted in total legislative gridlock. In response to the hearings, a bipartisan coalition introduced the UAP Disclosure Act. This was modeled directly on the JFK Records Act, demanding a strict, mandatory timeline for declassification. It was championed neutrally by lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, like Marco Rubio and Mike Gallagher. But when it was rolled into the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, intense pushback from the executive branch and intelligence agencies gutted the core powers of the review board. Meanwhile, you have this massive institutional conflict playing out. The Pentagon's public-facing office, AARO, released a report claiming they found absolutely no evidence of extraterrestrial material. But whistleblowers point out a glaring fundamental flaw. AARO simply doesn't have the high-level security clearances required to access the special access programs where this material is allegedly kept. I mean, think about it. You cannot investigate a room you aren't legally allowed to enter. The Pentagon UAP files are not a closed case. They're an open investigation. New testimony is still being given, new legislation is still being fought, new footage is still being classified. The question of what is in Earth's airspace that we did not build has not been answered. It has been officially asked, for the first time, by the people who are supposed to know. What they find, and whether we are allowed to know what they find, is one of the most important open questions of our time. I'll see you tomorrow when we turn to something that has been in the shadows even longer. A case that begins with a deathbed confession, a set of coordinates, and a forest in England where something came down that the British government has never fully explained. That's the Rendlesham Forest incident. And if you thought today was something, you haven't heard anything yet.